Hey there, Wes Platt, lead developer and writer for OtherSpace at jointhesaga.com, and welcome to the fourth episode of our OtherSpace audio logs, where I do readings and reenactments of some of our classic OtherSpace story arcs and scenes, and soon I'm going to be doing some from the current iteration on Slack, where we've been having a lot of fun since starting it up in the last couple of months at jointhesaga.slack.com. You should definitely join up. You can use slackpass.io/jointhesaga, and that automatically lets you subscribe to our Slack channel without having to jump through any special hoops. And getting involved is really simple. You just connect through a web browser or through an app on a smartphone, and no matter where you are, whatever device you're using, you should be able to get involved, create a character, and get involved in these scenes as they're evolving. We're already on the brink of a war between the Parallax and the Consortium after just a couple of months. And that's just because one of our players got involved in starting a plot rolling that took us out toward that territory and resulted in a huge space battle, which I think is going to be one of the first Slack era events that I do a reading of, probably in one of the upcoming episodes, not too distant from now. Before I get into reading this one, which is called The Bigger They Are, I want to thank our Raconteur level sponsors on Patreon. That's Elwindus and Newt. They're huge supporters. I really appreciate it. If you feel generous and want to contribute to our server costs and the expenses that go toward giving people prizes each month for Amazon.com certificates, feel free to visit patreon.com/jointhesaga and become a contributor there. If you're at least a Bard level sponsor, that's $5 a month. You get access to these new audio readings I'm doing of OtherSpace Flash Fiction. So hopefully that adds a little value to your contribution, and I appreciate it. So to give a little context to what happens in The Bigger They Are, this involves a character of mine named Colin Niedermeyer, one of my most iconic villains from the history of OtherSpace, and he had this tendency to torture and kill these tiny little creatures, humanoids called Nemoni. He would, put them in soup, drop them in hot water, poke them with little toothpicks, things like that. And Nemoni were characters that were created, a race created by Kolchak. And I had a lot of fun, dark, menacing fun, as Niedermeyer torturing these characters. And in this particular episode, Niedermeyer is getting his comeuppance by way of the Nemoni. So that brings us up to speed where he is now the right hand of Boss Cabrera. It's the year 3001 or 2, I think. It's after Sanctuary has gone off to hyperspace, come back. It's, all these years have passed, and instead of Lord Fagin being in charge of Tomenkora, it's Boss Cabrera. Still a mobster, still a crime syndicate in charge, and Niedermeyer is the right-hand man to Boss Cabrera. So, as the story begins, we're in a conference room. It's a brightly lit room with slit windows overlooking the city of Shadowheart. Taking up most of the room is an oval mahogany table surrounded by a dozen black leather chairs. Holographic emitters mounted on the ceiling are aimed at the center of the table. A stylized C gleams in steel on one wall. Guards stand on either side of the door. Niedermeyer walks into the conference room, followed by the no-neck thugs with their plasma pistols, Tony the Monobrow, and One Ear. Valentine is a few seconds behind Niedermeyer, her dark cloak drawn close about her. Her red lips are curled up somewhat sourly, and she drops into the chair nearest the door. Nikolai looks up as the others arrive and for the moment says nothing. Montgomery will probably be the last seated as he allows Niesa to sit before him. He looks over to see Niedermeyer and his duo, greeting the man with a nod and a faint smile, and then Valentine, to whom he merely nods, and then he finds a chair near the middle of the table and sits. Resting her elbows on the plush arms of her chair, Niesa steeples her fingers and waits. The frown on her face, the crease at her brow, deepen as Niedermeyer graces the room with his entourage. Making his way toward the chair at the head of the table, Niedermeyer says, "Anybody who didn't make it to this meeting loses a fucking finger when I see them next." He yanks back the chair, then thumps down into it. "This meeting of Cabrera Industries is called to order. You got a fucking thing to say, you raise your goddamn hand. You wait for me to call on you. If I don't call on you, you don't get all pouty and petulant. Pouty and petulant gets you killed." He glances around the table as Tony and One Ear take up flanking positions on either side of his chair. "We clear? Anybody deaf? Do I need to bring in a sign language interpreter or someone who speaks mech?" Nikolai nods. "Quite clear, comrade." Valentine flashes her predatory grin at Niedermeyer, folding her arms on the table's surface before her. A shrug of assent is her offering. One corner of Niesa's thin mouth lifts a degree, but she remains silent. "Of course, old bean," says Montgomery calmly. "All right, first things fucking first," Niedermeyer says, jabbing a finger at Montgomery. "Sawbones, there's a miserable fucker in the arena who got his guts handed to him by Knuckles. We acquired all his assets from a company called Starward Bound. Fix him up, toss him out." Valentine's eyes flick up at the mention of the arena, slide over to Montgomery, and then round back to Niedermeyer without any real expression moving through them. Niesa covers a small yawn with the back of her hand. Montgomery nods acquiescence, interlacing her fingers and placing his hands on the table in front of him. "Next, Ms. Galar and her protege, Junior, have been assigned to work with that freak Sakal on our new opium facility on Deserata," Niedermeyer says. He looks around the table. "The boss may be calling on other individuals within the organization to help with distribution and security." Valentine shrugs very lightly, another assenting gesture that simply says, "Go on." Her legs shift, recrossing under the table. There is a low, wet, disgusted noise from Niesa's throat at the mention of Sakal. "One other thing," Niedermeyer begins, but he's interrupted by a sound like the buzzing of a bee swarm coming from outside in the corridor. Into the conference room whooshes a trio of small craft that look for all the world like starship models of some kind. Bobbing and weaving past the surprised-looking thugs who try to intercept them, the ships and their tiny assortment of bristling weapons arc around toward the head of the conference table. Nikolai opens his eyes wide at the appearance of the tiny ships. "What is this?" Montgomery gulps, stunned into silence and immobility for the present time. Niesa pushes back from the table, easily slipping to her knees. Her smile, directed squarely at Niedermeyer, broadens just before her head slips below the table's mahogany surface. Valentine is on her feet immediately, cold blue eyes taking a quick circuit from the ships to Niedermeyer to the ships again. She is still for one long moment, posture balanced for a long quick motion forward, as if awaiting something. A tinny voice crackles from the speaker of the lead ship as it closes on Niedermeyer, who is getting to his feet and drawing his flechette pistol. "Halt! Colin Niedermeyer, for months you have hideously tortured Nemoni prisoners in your clutches. You will now answer for these atrocities." From her low crouch, the Timone moves further down the table's length and peeks her head out for a better view of the ship. The other two Nemoni vessels arc around slowly, keeping their guns aimed at those assembled. Montgomery stays seated, eyeing the other vessels warily, his hands still resting on the table. His face is almost bloodless in fear and surprise. Niedermeyer scooches away from the head of the table, shoving Tony the monobrow thug in front of him as he stands with his back to the Shadowheart cityscape. The Nemoni ships swing in unison to face Tony. Their weapon turrets begin to glow crimson. The lead vessel opens a set of bomb bay doors, and from the bay descends a small guided missile launcher. At first, Tony is amused, a goofy grin on his face. Then comes the tinny voice again. "Mini-nuclear missile armed! Prepare to fire!" Tony looks left, he looks right, he fixes his eyes on the missile, he grimaces and steps quickly to the left. That seems to be what Valentine was waiting for, her own pistol going untouched. She crouches, one motion tensing her legs and then sending her in a long dive for the rear of the Nemoni vessel that has its missile trained on Niedermeyer, red hair flying. You only live once, right? But Valentine is inexplicably frozen in midair. "Son of a bitch!" Niedermeyer shouts, aiming his flechette pistol at Tony and squeezing the trigger. The monobrow's head is shredded into exploding ribbons of flesh, hair, gray matter, blood, and bone. His corpse thuds limply on the carpeted floor. Niedermeyer then swings the gun around toward the lead Nemoni vessel and growls, "Your turn, pipsqueak!" Niesa ducks back under the table, pulling the pulse pistol from the back of her waistband. The noise of violence prompts a reaction from Montgomery as he chooses this time to try and slip from his chair and under the table. Nikolai slides off his chair and dives under the table. "Madness!" "No, it is not our turn," replies the tinny voice through the loudspeaker in the lead Nemoni ship. "It is yours!" And the guided missile fires its thrusters and launches toward Niedermeyer just as he's firing off a shot with the flechette pistol. The missile, already armed, explodes inches away from the honcho before he finishes squeezing the trigger, creating a shock wave and a radioactive fireball. The blast causes Niedermeyer's shot to go wild, just missing Niesa and shredding the paneling on the wall behind her and to the left. The fireball swooms outward with a thump, giving Valentine a nasty sunburn and setting Niedermeyer's expensive silk suit aflame, hurling him backward through one of the plate glass windows. Lit up like a bizarre tiki torch, still gripping his flechette pistol, Niedermeyer shatters the window and plummets into the blue-purple night, falling 14 floors to the pavement. Valentine takes a moment or two to realize she isn't going anywhere, struggling to move in the stinging sear of the explosion. Niesa dives further under the table, leveling the pistol at the well-dressed doctor. Despite the fevered look in her stony eyes, her smile is intact. "Just stay out of the way." The blaster's tip favors Nikolai briefly. "Both of you." Montgomery clears his throat, his voice thick with vague panic. "Dear lady, I wouldn't dream of getting in your way," he whispers. "Splendid," says a sharp-featured man in gray and black who steps into the conference room. "You may go now," he informs the Nemoni vessels. They arc around, making for the exit. He steps aside to let them pass, then clasps his hands behind his back and turns to regard the assembled guests. "Some of you know me, some of you don't. My name is Grimm. I am the new right hand of Boss Cabrera. My right hand is Niesa Galar." He gestures to the Timonay female, a thin smile on his face. "As you can see, the status quo is changing rather dramatically. Old agreements will be renegotiated. Old alliances will be reconsidered. It is a new day for Cabrera Industries." Grimm snaps his fingers in Valentine's direction. No sense hanging around. She falls onto the table, free to move again. Valentine, attempting to squirm around midair to glance at the new arrival, dives distinctively into a roll off the table and against the wall as she's released with only minimal gracelessness. Her eyes are huge and sharp, trained on Grimm above the dead-level set of her mouth. Her hands stay well away from her weapons, though. Nikolai looks up at Grimm, unable to speak. His eyes, though, show confusion. As she emerges from beneath the table, Niesa smooths a hand through the short pale hair above one ear. With an economy of motion, she replaces the pistol into her waistband and moves to stand across the table from the entering Grimm. Nikolai emerges from under the table too, getting himself a better view of the new arrival. "Any questions?" Grimm inquires as he walks around to the head of the table, casual despite the Arctic wind whipping around inside the conference room through the shattered window. Montgomery slowly makes his way out from under the table, shaken. He glances over at the broken window that served as Niedermeyer's last resort. "Vetataqwe, Colin. Irony is our greatest teacher." He attempts to straighten his tie and lapels with fingers gone from shaky to calm. To Grimm he states, "There are no questions." Nikolai manages to regain some stability. "No questions at all, comrade." A few hours later, In the lobby of Cabrera Industries, a stylized C sculpted in gleaming aluminum rotates in an anti-grav field suspended some 30 feet overhead in the atrium of this 20-floor office tower in the center of the city of Shadowheart. Where the rest of the city rarely seems to have any indication of law enforcement presence, this building absolutely reeks of high security coverage, from the armed guards flanking the entrance and the lift doors to the cameras mounted in corners to the ever-present roaming hoverbot with its scanners and stun weaponry. A sign glows on the north wall reading Cabrera Industries. Sakal exhales gently, tilting his head a fraction. Thankfully, you know better. He doesn't seem to have noticed the new arrival yet, sitting in the waiting area with a briefcase in his hands. The door catches Niesa's attention. Of course, she says, then turns her head toward the door, not relinquishing her spot in front of where Sakal sits. The white-haired man steps off the lift, mouth twisted in a grimace as he walks toward Niesa. After 3 centuries of walking through bulkheads and making other spectacular entrances, I must say it provides a bit of humility riding in one of those caskets. He jerks a thumb over his shoulder at the lift. He regards Sakal coolly. Ah, Grimm says, our man on Desirata. Sakal unfolds himself from the chair, coming face to face with Niesa. Sparing her a brief glance, he steps sideways away from her and turns to Grimm. His vocalizer expresses, yes, I'm here to see a Mr. Grimm. Niesa's smile broadens at that, but she remains silent. An eyebrow inches upward. The right corner of his mouth quirks up a fraction. The man with the spiky white hair clasps his hands behind his back and says, now that you have seen me, you may tell all your friends. Would you care for a holographic picture, perhaps? An autograph? A glass of water turned to wine? Sakal shrugs helplessly, shifting his briefcase to his ungloved hand. Dull, neutral eyes fix Grimm, not particularly evaluating. I'm afraid I don't get the humor, he says, voice level, and extends his right hand. I'm Sakal. I'm sure you've read my file. Grimm studies the extended hand as if the fingers have serpents' heads. He nods, tilts his head, and then stares blankly at Sakal. You thought I was joking? How odd. Niesa coughs quietly into the back of her hand, silvered eyes studying the exchange as if it were some grim tennis match. Sakal returns his hand to its place by his side without glancing at it. In that case, I'll have that glass of wine, please. He blinks once, slowly, like a reptile. Niceties aside, I won't waste your time. I have a kilo of pure heroin here, and half a standard ton more in my ship. Grimm starts pacing around to Sakal's left, hands clasped behind his back, his expression inscrutable. Even disfigured, you are a creature of vanity, the spike-haired man says softly. You cling to your freakish nature now like an old trollop clings to her sequin dresses and her cheap blush. He stops just behind Sakal and turns to speak into where his ears should be. Calmly, softly, he states, but no matter how much blush she wears or how shiny are the sequins of her gown, she remains a gutter whore with sagging breasts, smelling of menthol and melancholy. Niesa bites at her bottom lip to still a small twitch that has started there, her gaze tracing the dull lines of Sakal's mask as Grimm speaks. Sakal closes his eyes briefly. When they open, they hold the same inscrutable flatness as before. I put whatever I have to whatever use I can, in occurrence toward the boss's profit. Would you like to sample the heroin? The ghost of a smile briefly haunts Grimm's thin lips. He shakes his head, completing the circuit around Sakal. In a voice that might just as well be reciting a prayer from a hymnal, he says, I think not, but I will tell you this, because I understand your time shares the same intrinsic value as the ejaculate of a donkey. Boss Cabrera is in the process of reviewing and reconsidering all prior arrangements during the Niedermeyer era. It would appear that certain elements of Mr. Niedermeyer's activities were kept from his employer, and this has left said employer rather cross with said employee, and rather distrustful of those who were counted among his associates. He turns toward Niesa. So what do you think, Ms. Galar, of our friend? Niesa's head inclines thoughtfully at that, her faint smile returning like the sun after a brief summer shower. I have not known Mr. Kaz for more than a week, she says, folding her arms across her chest and considering the length of him as she speaks. So as for his business practices, I cannot give you an estimation of his worth. She pauses, eyes narrowing a fraction. But in the short term I have known him, Mr. Kaz has expressed great interest in doing only what is profitable for the company. High praise indeed, Grimm says, but his voice offers no sense of commitment. He favors Sakal with a tight smile. Boss Cabrera's funds already have been invested. It would be unwise to endanger that investment. As you attest to the quality, I will take your word for it, Mr. Kaz, was it? He walks to stand next to Niesa. So long as Cabrera Industries receives half the profits off the gross, not the net, we shall be partners in good standing. Sakal inclines his head at the last bit, otherwise immobile. I wasn't aware of Mr. Niedermeyer's. He pauses, perhaps searching for the correct Terran word. Ungrateful behavior. However, I have a deal with Cabrera Industries that I intend to carry out fully. Now, would you like me to deposit half of the opiates produced on planet, say every week, or would you like me to simply bring cash? Niesa licks her lips and waits. Both eyebrows arch upward. Grimm tisk-tisks. In this era of modern technology, Mr. Kaz, you may easily satisfy your obligation to this organization through the remote transfer of funds to certain offshore accounts. Specifically, you will make your deposits to the Grandview Bank on Savad. The payments will then be shuffled through a series of dummied accounts and investment fronts. Once completely laundered and cleaned of your taint, then and only then will the money enter the accounts of Cabrera Industries. Still calmly, serenely, he continues, if you come to this planet again with a cargo hold loaded with drugs, unbidden, serenading me with the songs of purity and potency, speaking of currency and deals, you will spend the remainder of your severely shortened life pleading for the glorious mercy of death. Sakal nods again and joins his hands at his back with his briefcase. Very well. Is Ms. Galar's assignment to my operation discontinued? Easily, Niesa's gaze slides from Sakal to Grimm, her own pale eyebrows lifting almost imperceptibly. Grimm lifts his chin and his eyes, predatory, calculating, fixed on Sakal. Much to the contrary, her observations of your activities are more critical than ever as Cabrera Industries enters this new and delicate phase of existence. And be mindful, I am the right hand to God, and she, he tilts his head toward Niesa, is as God's eyes. Should harm come to her under your watch, you will die. Should harm come to her in your absence and be linked to you, he pauses, staring coldly at Sakal, and it would, I assure you, then you would, in that instance, also die. So, you see, it is quite simple to survive under these conditions. See that no harm comes to Ms. Galar, and behave in a fashion that is profitable to Cabrera Industries. Sakal grunts softly, almost imperceptibly, as his voice device speaks. Clear. Niesa turns from the men and walks a short distance away, lifts her gaze to the dome overhead. Splendid, Grimm says, clasping his hands behind his back. So you have met Mr. Grimm. Are you suitably acquainted? Suitably, parrots Sakal, returning his hands to his side, briefcase thumping against his knee. Anything else before I'm out of here? Niesa turns back, her gaze again resting squarely on Grimm. Most excellent, the new Cabrera frontman intones, with absolutely no enthusiasm, lukewarm broth being passed off as rich minestrone soup. One final word of caution, Grimm states. This will be our next to last meeting. So long as Miss Galar remains satisfied with your activities, we will never have to set eyes on each other again. But should we meet again, you and I, mine will be the last face you ever see. His voice barely registers above a whisper. Good day, Mr. Kaz. If Sakal is impressed by the threats, it certainly doesn't show. With a final nod, the man turns and makes his way toward the door, glancing blankly to Niesa as he exits. Niesa lowers her chin slightly by way of farewell, but that is all. That's it for episode 4 of our OtherSpace audio logs, the bigger they are. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Thanks again to Elwindus and Newt, our Raconteur sponsors on Patreon at patreon.com/jointhesaga. And please definitely help us make more of these stories happen. Join us at slackpass.io/jointhesaga. Sign up, join OtherSpace on Slack, and help shape your worlds and your stories in a new place. Take care.